What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining us today for lesson number 2 in our course for beginning improvisers. Now, whether you're a middle or high school student just starting to work on this stuff, maybe you're a more experienced player who's just never had the chance to really work on your improvisation, or maybe you're a teacher looking for things to work on with your student, I think the content of this course will be really helpful for everybody as they get started on their journey to becoming good jazz trombone players. So as I mentioned, this is lesson number 2. If you're watching all of these, I'd really encourage you to check them out in the order that they appear. This is sort of like progressive material that we're working on, meaning that we really want to think a little bit, well, it's in number 1, then to number 2, then to number 3. You don't have to watch them that way, but I do think it'll be best for students if they do kind of deal with the information in that order. But the question might be, well, what did we talk about in lesson number 1? Just a little quick review. We really dug into rhythm. I will put the link to that lesson down in the description, but kind of the short version of what we talked about is there's 2 big things we want to worry about. Number 1 is we've got to feel the pulse. Regardless of what style of music we're playing, almost all music has a physical pulse that we can feel. And especially if we're playing jazz or any of the related styles, this was dance music originally, and we want to connect with that dance sensibility. So you got to feel that physically, not just think it here, but feel it in your body. Concept number 2 from that first lesson is we want to be able to develop a big kind of vocabulary of different rhythmic ideas that have clear beginnings, middles, and endings. Or in the case of maybe a shorter rhythmic idea, it just has a beginning and ending. It's going to be things that sound like this. Or maybe like this. Or even like this. These are all examples of rhythmic vocabulary. We want to learn all of this by ear ideally. So in that first lesson and in this lesson today, you won't see a ton of musical examples kind of appear at the bottom of the screen. We want to really learn this via listening. Today, we're going to practice some of these concepts in an improvisational way. And when we start to do this, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is a good rhythm? There's not really one correct answer to this. There's not like a list of correct rhythms floating out there somewhere. We really learn this through listening, as I just said, and we'll actually come back to that at the end of the lesson. But we've really got to experiment, and I think my biggest thing that I want students to think about is, does it feel good? And today we're going to talk about swing, and so we've just got to ask ourselves, does this rhythm fit into swing in a way that kind of like makes me feel where the beat is, maybe makes me nod my head a little bit? For today's lesson, I only want you to focus on one concept that's going to help guide your choices, and that is, am I playing downbeats or am I playing offbeats? We're not going to worry about triplets, we're not going to worry about 16th notes, just downbeats and offbeats. This is where most of our swing is going to come from, and actually the most swinging thing in the world is just to play quarter notes. Now, not necessarily easy to make that swing, but if you can really connect with the rhythm section, the bass player, the drummer, and just play quarter notes with great sound, great articulation, that can be the most swinging thing in the world, as long as it really fits together with them. Now, we're going to play a variety of things today, not just quarter notes, but really just think about, am I playing a downbeat or am I playing an offbeat? And when I play something and you're responding to it, just think, did he play mostly downbeats or did he play mostly offbeats? And then maybe you model that, or maybe you do the opposite of that. Either way is fine. For those of you watching this who are like, Sean, I'd love a little additional support practicing this stuff beyond what we deal with today. Check me out in the virtual studio. The link is down in the description of this video. That'll take you over to Patreon. You can find a handout, another practice lesson that goes along with this, and some other resources, including etudes and that type of stuff to practice all the stuff that appears on this channel. So let's get into practicing some of this stuff. We're going to do call and response. I'm going to play something and you are going to play back to me. However, you're not going to play the same thing that I did like we did in the first lesson. You're going to improvise what you play back based on what I play. We're all just going to still stay on one note. We're going to stay on a B flat on top of our staff. And I just want you to worry about downbeats and offbeats playing in time. That's the only thing I want you to worry about. We're going to start with the metronome here, and we're going to do a 2-bar kind of call and response structure. I'm going to play a measure. You're going to play a measure. I'm going to play a measure, you're going to play a measure. We're going to go back and forth a couple times and really just listen and ask yourself, am I feeling that time and am I with the time? right, how'd that feel for you? Did you feel like you were able to stay with the time? If you feel like you were having a hard time with that, I would encourage you to simplify your rhythms a little bit. If you're feeling like, yeah, I was really like in the pocket, really then to start think about, am I responding to what Sean is playing? You know, am I being thoughtful about either kind of finishing off his phrase or maybe like pushing against his phrase and playing something that's a little bit different? So now let's move this into a little bit longer phrase. Now we're going to do 4 measures. I'm going to play 2 bars. You're going to play 2 bars back. And again, we're going to have no rest in between here because this is just like if maybe we were doing call and response or trading, at like a jam session or on a gig or something like that. Still just on one note, still just a B flat, still with a metronome. All right, so far we've only worried about one note, and you're probably asking yourself, Sean, when the heck are we gonna move? I'm never gonna play a solo made up of just one note. As we're building our rhythmic vocabulary, really important that we keep things simple so we can focus on that concept of am I playing in time? But let's talk about adding just a few different notes in here. We are just gonna worry about playing the root and the fifth of whatever key we're in. So right now we're playing in the key of B flat. So B flat is our root, and whether we're playing a low B flat, a middle B flat, high B flat, it's all the root. So all those are fair game. We're gonna add the 5th note of the scale. Now, if you're not so sure about how we find what the 5th of the scale is, we are talking about what are called scale degrees. So when we play a scale, we can just think, what note is it in the scale? So if I play B flat major, if I count up to the 5th note, B flat is 1, or the root, C is 2, D is 3, E flat is 4, F is 5. So that is my 5th, and we could do this in any scale. Now F is the 5th in B flat, but in a different scale, it's no longer going to be the 5th. And so we've got to keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that when we descend the scale, F is still the 5th, even though we don't encounter it as the 5th note. We always base this on the bottom of the scale going up when we're talking about these scale degrees. So today we're worried about the root and the 5th. Knowing these scale degrees will become more important as we add more moving notes into our ideas. Just adding this one extra note vastly improves our melodic options. Already that's sounding way more like a melody that we might actually use when we're improvising, but I can still really focus on rhythm, and that's why doing just one note is so helpful for us here. So now that we've got a few notes to choose from, let's move this with a play along. We're still going to keep swinging, and just like we started with, we're going to do call and response, but now we are going to do 4 measures each. I'm going to play 4 measures, you're going to play 4 measures. There's going to be no bass, there's going to be no piano, it's just drums, so we're really still keying in on rhythm, and we're going to think, how can we build longer phrases with rhythms? So we could combine kind of different rhythmic ideas we had, or maybe we could think that our whole phrase has sort of that beginning, middle, and end structure. Maybe the rhythms start a little more simple, maybe it sort of crescendos in rhythmic intensity to the middle where there's a little more activity, and then finishes off. There's lots of different options. You don't have to think of just that way of doing it, but we do want to think that that phrase has some shape, and make sure to think about, do I have space at the ending? Most phrases have a little bit of space at the end, and then maybe they play into the next phrase or something like that. It's not just notes the entire time. So let's check it out. We're going to go with a play along, back and forth a few times. I will start using just B flats and Fs, any octave, and 4-bar phrases each. This type of practice is indispensable for us as improvisers. Having our rhythm being super happening is so important to us sounding convincing and feeling really confident that we can play with the rhythm section. Now, I mentioned listening at the top of this lesson. Listening is really how we want to learn this stuff. Yeah, it's great for you to come and practice with me here on YouTube, maybe get a handout that has some good rhythms, but at the end of the day, you've got to listen to great jazz musicians and try to pick up on some of the rhythms they were using. In the first lesson, we talked about J.J. Johnson. He has got to be a foundation for us as trombone players. Today, we're going to actually look at a non-trombone musician. We're going to talk about Lester Young. Now, he was one of J.J.'s biggest influences. He sort of straddles kind of the period of the swing era and the bebop period. He played in kind of like the 30s, 40s, and beyond, but really was active in both of those periods and just a really important figure in general. The song I'd encourage you to check out, the link is down in the description, is Lester's Be-bop Boogie. This is a blues, and he plays actually a couple solos. He kind of plays a solo at the beginning, there's some other instruments at solo, and then he plays another solo later in the tune. And there's just great rhythms throughout this, really swinging, really accessible for us as trombone players, even though he's a saxophone player. He doesn't just play like a million super fast notes, and just so swinging, and it just feels good to kind of think about how his rhythms work. Okay, hopefully these 2 lessons really lay a strong foundation of rhythm for you. In the next lesson, we are going to move on to actually like playing some melody and moving some notes and that type of thing. But if our rhythm isn't good, even if we learn all the cool scales, arpeggios, different ideas, licks and stuff like that, it just doesn't matter. Having really great rhythm and really great feel should be the hallmark of your playing. All right, we'll see you in the woodshed.